Welcome to Stroke Forward. My name is Marsha Moran. For the next 40 minutes or so, we are going to talk about things that stroke survivors, or any brain injury survivor, deals with. If you look at me today, you probably don't see a person who had a stroke, but I feel it. My body functions differently. Do I think I will get back to 100%? Yes, because to think differently is to admit defeat. We will talk to all sorts of people who have been there, from survivors to caretakers to doctors, nurses, therapists, friends, and family who have seen us at our weakest. They have cheered us with their victories, no matter how large or how small. How did we get here? That's what this show is going to tell you. Thomas G. Broussard, Jr., Ph.D., is a 3-time stroke survivor and Johnny Appleseed of aphasia awareness. Dr. Broussard was an associate dean at the Heller School of Brandeis University until his stroke in 2011. He started Stroke Educator, Inc., and a nonprofit, Aphasia Nation, Inc., with a national aphasia awareness campaign dedicated to educating the wider public about aphasia, a life-changing language disorder that few have ever heard of. I am delighted to introduce Tom Broussard, Jr. on the call today. How are you doing, Tom?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. So
nice to see you.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of meeting you about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it sounded like you didn't have aphasia. So do you have aphasia anymore?
People have asked me that before. My answer is no, I still have aphasia. People then say, well, how come you can speak so well? And what I found out over time, that there are situations, environments that I can, when I happen to be put in that place, then I can feel it. It has to do typically with emotion and stress, or illness, meaning like a flu, because that too has a direct impact on being able to speak well. And I think it has to do with the emotional component, the stress component, when it comes to the connectivity that has been disturbed. As they say, we haven't really lost our language. We've lost the connective tissue between all of these cells. So the speed is lost. And as a result, it can't run at the same speed that it used to. So when there's throw in the emotional component, and this usually with my family, you know, if we're angry about something, whatever it might be, I end up almost crying, trying to tell them I can't find my words, while trying to say I can't find those words, right? So I just, you know, get like this. And I realize that as much as I've progressed, there are still the depths of the brain, the way it works, that they're, if put in a certain position, I will have lost that last bit of the connectivity that was lost and might never get back, such that the day before my stroke, I was just as good as I used to be. And now, how could I ever be that way? I don't think that will happen, even though I do appreciate, because people have seen the evidence of what I had before. You can work really, really hard, but I don't think I'll ever be what they call perfect. Although we have this conversation, so people can say, oh, you can still have these issues once you're put into a situation that you're not usually accustomed to. And that can grab it such that it is, finds itself unable to make that connectivity with the speed that it used to have.
Really? Okay. So I find that your newsletters are wonderful. And there's something about aphasia in each newsletter, at least once, oftentimes more, that I didn't know. So why don't we talk about, you said the one in January. What one is that about?
I started a survey. There are 2,446 stroke-centered hospitals, although I'm saying it that way. Every year, every month, hospitals are, you know, pushing forward, trying to become stroke-centered, meaning accredited by the Joint Commission. So even though I say the number, it's obviously going to go up, or some close, or some combined with other hospitals. So, it somewhat floats, but it's a lot of hospitals.
Right.
And I'm surveying all of them. So the first work on it was an article I made last month, 129 hospitals that I had surveyed, and into this database. It's really just a big spreadsheet. And it shows that, and I really should have made sure I had it in front of me. I really do think well, 129, almost 90% of those hospitals have no information about aphasia, or something very little. I say little because if the word aphasia shows up in a hospital, I have to say that it is not nothing, right? So if I have
Right.
nothing, that means nothing. The next one says one mention. I have to put in one mention. So it turns out that the first three in that survey is nothing, a little, and a little or more, with a link, any kind of link that can take you to the National Aphasia Association, to any number of places. And then three others where you get more information, good information, and then not perfect, but perfect. So there's 3 and 3. And then I combine all of them and say, these are the ones who have almost no information or none. And this one, there is some amount of information. And it turns out that it's almost 90% are none, and 10 to 12% have something. None are perfect. One hospital out of 129, one hospital, you would say, oh, this is really good. And it is. I'm actually trying to get that hospital to let me use their name, to use their information, make a little clip off of their computers, off their hospital, and then I can use that and send it to these hospitals. Say, all you have to do is put this in. It doesn't take a whole lot of work, although it does take a little bit of work, I know, and sometimes a lot of work, but that's what that article is talking about. 129 is the hospital. And the next article, in about a month, we'll have at least now 400 of those hospitals, but I've already been working on it. So right now it's 110, almost 100 more, and the statistics are remaining pretty much the same. We're at 88 to 90%, really 88% with nothing or very little, and 12% with something or something good. Yeah.
That seems so sad.
Oh, it's awful.
Yeah. I mean, so with so many people having aphasia, what do they do?
Well, that is all part of this issue. 25 to 40% of people with stroke have aphasia. I had aphasia when I was discharged. I didn't get any information when I left other than an assessment, but I didn't get that when I left with that assessment. Me and my family didn't realize to get that assessment, I had to go to the hospital and order it. So a year later, we ordered it, got that, went home. I was home for a month, which is good because it takes a long time for your brain to settle down. But reading the articles and the research that the scientists have been doing, they say we don't get to rehab facilities, outpatient, for 3 to 6 months. That's when I began to realize that if I was sitting home for 3 to 6 months, not knowing about aphasia, not even though I would have had that word, my family would have put it online for me to look at. That is where the issue starts. Is if the hospital doesn't tell you you have aphasia every single day, and they won't, they will actually tell you, no, we are here to deal with you physically. All the rest of neurological things, you're going to get it at your next facility, at your next step. And they tell that over and over again. And it shows up in my book 1. You actually see it because I had a quote from the therapist talking about that. And we don't even talk about it. We don't even talk about it. So yes, that is why the source of aphasia awareness has to start at the hospital and has to start on their website. There has to be training and there has to be material. And then I say, and I've heard some of them say, well, there's lots of things, we print them out from the American Heart or the National Aphasia. That's all very helpful, but a piece of paper gets thrown away. You have to give them a book It has to be written by a person with aphasia who now can better understand why the images of the ABCs of aphasia is so important, because
Yeah.
this, I couldn't understand it except the pictures. It starts with pictures. Don't give me
Yeah.
something that's nothing but words. I can't read it. And it took me almost exactly a month, 11 months before I could read. So why do these things? You cannot do that. You cannot do that. And if you think that you have everything you need with MDs and doctors and even SLPs, you find out that still this healthcare world is still highly siloed. So the SLPs at those hospitals, they don't talk to the stroke coordinators. They're not really involved with each other. They don't really know about each other, and they certainly don't engage with that to realize, oh, we're in this silo. When I do that assessment, it has nothing to do with these stroke people saying, oh, when you're discharged, we're going to give you information about aphasia too. That doesn't happen. I was discharged from one of the biggest, most well-known, comprehensive stroke center, and I didn't get anything. And now I'm talking to them and they say, yeah, well, we think we give something out. And I said, well, apparently you don't, because I've been talking to other people. And even the nurses say, yeah, we're not, no, we don't know. No, you didn't get it. I actually go there and donated some more books just recently from a stroke person that I knew. So no, they didn't even provide what they think they do. That means it's not in the system. It's not embedded into the system, so that when you hit all those buttons that bring you to your discharge material day, right? They have to have all these in step. It's not even on that list. So it has to be on the list. It'd have to push that button. Now they would get it at discharge.
So I'm a person with aphasia. So let's say it's almost 9 years ago and I'm getting released from the hospital here. What can I do to ensure that I get more information than I got? Because like you, I really didn't get much. Is there anything?
Well, I do say this, everybody should get a copy of the ABCs of aphasia. That is where you start. I say that because I've talked to obviously many hospitals and their stroke coordinators and their senior nurses. And they say, oh yeah, it's okay. We can give them a piece of paper. And sometimes they'll print them out. Actually, they actually do print them out off of other people's hospitals and things. But a piece of paper given as part of a larger sheaf of other papers of blood pressure, sleeping well, toileting, all these other things, they'll get thrown away and they won't be there to be seen. Plus they're all in printed word. So you have to give them something for the family, of course, because in my case, I wouldn't have known either. But even on that day, if they'd given me the ABCs of aphasia, I would be looking at, obviously some are humorous little pictures. You go, oh, on the inside, oh, that's what's happening with me. Because then I would see there's this little brain lifting weights, right? All you have to do is look at that and go, oh, that's how this works. Somehow is wrong with me. Because when I left, I actually left saying, there must be something wrong with my brain, but I didn't know what that was. I was actually saying that to myself, didn't know anything about aphasia. But once I saw those pictures, you go, oh, and then lots of other pictures too. You need the images, then you start to see more words, big words, a couple of words, then there's more information once your brain is working on making all of this work. And then, of course, part of the book has additional tools, whether you have to have your aphasia card, caregivers material, and there's lots of caregiver places where you can get almost really books about how all that works. 22 of the most well-known organizations in the country about aphasia, and a big glossary in the back that gives you lots more information. Not that you yourself could actually read it, but as you get better, you can. Plus the family can look at that and go, oh, all of these difficult words to understand, including, of course, a whole book about this thing called aphasia, which otherwise just you wouldn't know without starting that as the source. And then, yes, of course, then you go right to other places once you begin more adapted to this, about the National Aphasia Association, Aphasia Nation, American Heart and American Stroke Associations and others as well across the country, because I made sure we had enough on the West Coast, the East Coast, the South, and the North in terms of organizations that could be availed.
Okay. So I'm going to slightly switch gears here and talk about your latest newsletter. So in that one, you said something about Hildra Schul. I'm sorry, Hildra Schul. And I found it amazing that she said something about our language is not lost or destroyed, but swamped in noise and general asynchronous chaos of processes whose mass action can no longer be properly coordinated. That is amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So what else did you understand that Schul believed?
Yeah, Schul's is as a star. Of course, all of my scientists are stars to me. I've heard of Schul before, and had obviously been reading about her. But as I started to read more scientist material, then I started to see what even they've been seeing in the 40s and 50s, what should be considered as a new way of approach today about aphasia recovery. And Schul just happens to be, I could have picked any number of the people because several of the scientists are before Schul's time. But I'm looking for the themes of each one of those scientists, and I believe, I have a lot of work to do, but I believe that I will be stringing them together, binding them together with their individual themes that become what I think will be the new aphasia approach to recovery today, written by me, not an SLP, not an MD. So I don't know how far this is going to go with people, but as you have seen, and you will see from others, you go, oh, I understand what she said. Now, is that wrong? No. You start to see, hers is a really good example of swamped in the noise. Because I, even at the very beginning, when I could see individual letters and words, individual, even though I couldn't pronounce them, unless they were really long, I knew what they meant. But if you put two together or three together to become a sentence, then I said, I don't know why I can't read that, even if I could read it individually. But once you put them together, it turns out that the connective tissue that allows you to be able to, quote, read and communicate, that's the connective tissue that has been damaged. Not the words themselves, not the letters themselves, but the connectivity between all of them. And so it wasn't that they were lost, but as she had said, this believe it or not, this swamped in the noise. So the next, and I do believe that all of these, and I used to say 15 scientists, now it's going to be more like 20. I'm trying to stop before that happens because I don't have enough time to do all those articles and get to the next book. But when you put them all together and you look for that central theme, you're going to see, even if there's 150 years ago, that theme is there. You can hear it in hers or her voices, and you go, oh, I don't know where all that theme came from, that now if you put them together, you go, oh, this could be what we should be doing now too, given that there aren't enough speech language people out there. We have to learn a lot more earlier in the process ourselves, especially since we're home alone so much, meaning 3 to 6 months, that a lot of people won't avail themselves of any therapy after that. So you end up with lots and lots of people who just stay at home. They don't really know anything. Nobody will tell them. So you have to actually give them more books, more information to say, this is what you can do on your own. And as a result of doing that, you will get better and better if you do these various things, even if you don't get to formal therapy. So the next book, as a good example, is a man named Joseph M. Wetman, that a lot of people wouldn't know about. I've found out about him and read about him, and they ran together, Schulz and Wetman, fairly close to each other, about 10, 15 years apart, but enough that they knew each other. And you get to see how Wetman was also writing about the stimulation approach to aphasia recovery. And he was describing what he calls the one-person approach. So you're going to see how that is going to blend with Schul's. And then each time a new scientist comes together, you get to see how they each blend. Because it's not to say one is right and one is wrong, because you can actually see some things that are, quote, wrong based on today's science. So I'm okay with that, right? These folks 150 years ago, they were doing the best they could with the new set of lexicon that they were creating. But yes, that is what's going to be happening. And you get to see some amazing scientists of whom most people had no idea, even modern people that you know who they are, like Freud. You know about Freud, right? Freud, everybody knows Freud. You don't realize that he was one of the first aphasiologists for like 10 or 12 years before he shifted into his socioanalysis work. So before that, he was embedded in aphasia. Nobody knows anything about it, very few. But even he wrote his first book. You know what the name of his first book is?
No.
On aphasia. That's his first book.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's wicked smart. And as he was writing about it, he shifted, obviously, but it took him a good 10 years. And even back then, described him as one of the first aphasiologists. He was very interested in exactly the same things that Wetman and Schul were also considering, even though he wrote that book. And over the next 10 years, back then, he sold, I forget, a couple hundred books over 10 years. Nobody really knew, they didn't care, and he moved on to other things. So you get to see a lot is going to come out of on aphasia from Freud. So you get to see lots of other people to whom most even therapists themselves, because you only have 2 years to get your degree. I've been doing this now for a long, long time, and I don't have anything to do but doing this. I mean, they have their lives to do and patients to treat. But now hopefully they'll go back and start to realize, oh, this helps me now based on Schul. This helps me more in another little different way with Wetman, and then Freud, and then Broca, all these other scientists going forward. Yeah,
interesting.
I'm trying to get it all done by the end of the year, but that means twice a month for the next 12 months. And I'm not sure if I can get all that done in time for the next book. So, but yeah, at least you'll get to see it along the way.
Yeah. So I can't wait to read the book once you're done.
And you get to see the articles. You get them once or twice a month along the way.
Yeah. So I went to the National Aphasia Association's website, and they had a survey out that was done in 2022 that says that 40% of Americans understand the word aphasia. Do you believe that?
No.
Why?
Oh, a longer story, huh?
No, yeah.
What's happening is, well, if you've seen from the previous surveys, they do it every 4 years. I think the first one was 8%. The second one, 5 years later, was 7.7%, I think. So it's going worse, people trying to figure out how to make aphasia awareness become real. That's when I discovered the hospital issue. But then last year, and now this year, but really just recently, of course, several things have happened. Of course, Gabby. So there's various people that are stars in our press world, social media world. Gabby Gifford was shot 11 years ago and ends up with aphasia. That's one kind of aphasia, right? Then Bruce Willis last year was deemed as having aphasia. There was no discussion. There was a little bit of discussion about, while he's having other cognitive degenerative components of that, nobody talked about the fact that he might have had primary progressive aphasia, and now they say he has, obviously, dementia of a certain kind. but it all started with them calling it aphasia. Then we have Fetterman, who was the governor of Pennsylvania. He's now the senator of Pennsylvania. His staff and he himself, I'm sure he has aphasia. I'm sure that's why we didn't see his records, because it would have been SLP saying, oh, he's assessed with aphasia. I'm saying all this as if I know something. I don't know anything.
Right.
But his staff never said he had aphasia to this day. They said he has an auditorial disorder, which I also have. You have. We all have. If you have, often have with aphasia. So I am sure that they said, "Oh my, Bruce Willis, he has aphasia. If I say I have aphasia, they're going to think I'm like him, and clearly he's in trouble." So they just say, "I'm not even going to call it aphasia." But I say, now people at least hear that word aphasia. They still have no idea, because it could be aphasia from a shotgun, aphasia when it's not really aphasia, or could have been PPA, primary progressive aphasia, or a person who we would say has aphasia. They said, oh, I don't have aphasia. I have this other thing. Why? Because again, there's all these politics and angles on things. But I think still it helps people understand that word. Having said that, if for the next year or two, we don't hear any stars, anybody in the social media that everybody is well aware of, like if you know, a former president or anybody else that high up had stroke and aphasia, and it was stated that way. If you don't have that in the next 2 years, if you were to have another 1,000 people and ask them the question, they go, yeah, I don't know much about aphasia. Maybe Bruce Willis, maybe. You know what I mean? But yes, we need to learn something. What do we say, 9 times before we really understand what this means? So if you don't read any of my work or anybody else's, they'll just hear, yeah, aphasia, name the name, something's wrong with them. And that's as far as they might get. But yeah, I wouldn't put them at 40%. I'm sure it'll be down next year. But again, at that point, you go, what's the matter? The up and the down. Really, what I'm working on is, what is the foundation for making our wider public, 330 million people, know anything about aphasia? It starts at the hospital. Given that 800,000 people have stroke every single year, that means 25 to 40%. That means 250 up to 400,000 people, not that many, but obviously getting closer. 250,000 have aphasia. And now you realize, oh, hospitals don't say that word, don't use that word. They don't educate the public about that. So they end up without knowing about this thing about aphasia. So it has to come in the back door with these stars that happen to have it going forward.
Yeah, I find it interesting that aphasia doesn't impact a person's intelligence, and yet Bruce Willis has dementia, and they said that he has aphasia. So I think that someone like Fetterman would be worried that I can't say I have aphasia, because then people will think that I've lost my intelligence.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they, and part of all of this in terms of awareness started in World War II. Started really in World War I, but World War II, with the service people coming home with aphasia, with a tremendous amount of brain injured people. And the US population, never mind the medical community, really didn't know what to do. And they started building some very focused hospitals just for brain injury people coming from the war. Typically on the East Coast, typically either at hotels when they converted them or new facilities. But they didn't have the staff, right? Where are you going to find an SLP master's program? They didn't exist. They did some other things, and they started using elementary school teachers as their best guest going forward as teachers to help be aphasia therapeutic teachers.
Check out part 2, where Tom describes how the CDC doesn't have a communication domain.